Chirot, Isoda Biha. 1,000 welcomes to Crown de Biha short stories and poetry for March 29, 2024. I'm Terence O'Donnell, your Irish Skillet, with more stories and poems from medium writers. Again this week, I have 5 short stories and a poem. The first chapter is Chapter 9 of the ongoing story from Beyond the Water Wall, then a David Pahor story of escape, a children's ghost story, an Irish folklore story, a science fiction version of A Dangerous Curiosity, and another wonderful poem by David B., who is rapidly becoming one of my favorite poets. So gather around and let me read to you for a bit. I will add in my commercial break after the first 3 stories again today. With regard to that, I want to let everyone know some good news, especially for my medium writers. This podcast has been accepted for broadcast by WAA Radio, which is Wreaths Across America, a nonprofit radio station from Portland, Maine, which means this podcast will have even more distribution across the world. Listen to the commercial for more details. I hope you'll consider a donation to help me keep this going. Any amount is fine. I use PayPal for your safety, as it allows you to donate without giving up any personal information, and you can use any currency around the world. It goes to support all that I give to bring these stories and poems to the world. So now let's get into the first story for today, and it is Chapter 9 from Beyond the Water Wall by Dawn Woodby. No Disembark. Now, as we went from last week, previously, Mars and Wren met with the Freedom Renegade members and convinced them to provide them with materials to build explosives. The cloudy sky didn't stop the heat. Mars and Wren shielded their eyes from the sand with their forearms as they walked on the beach. Listening to the resounding waves, they chose to remain silent. Trench contemplated the sea from inside his anchored boat. He jumped out as they approached, splashing water from the shallow part of the sea. "So, should we be going now?" he asked, moving towards the sand. Mars glanced at Wren from the corner of his eye. "Yeah, the sooner the better." The ship went up and down as the waves passed. The wind was strong and the sky was gray. A storm might come, Mars thought to himself. It reminded him of the moment the cruise had crashed. "Don't worry about it, young lady," the fisherman said. "This puny ship has seen much worse than this." Wren didn't react. She sat looking at the horizon, her shoulders slightly curled, running her fingers through her long dark hair. She seemed more relaxed than Mars would expect. She had been through a roller coaster, but she seemed utterly unshaken. He couldn't know exactly how she used to be before his arrival. His reference was someone who lived through a completely different set of circumstances. He wasn't able to tell them apart on most occasions. This wasn't one of them. "It was right there that I found you," Trench pointed to a cluster of large rocks. "You were stuck between 2 of those rocks, semi-conscious, but still holding on to them." "Is there any way to stop near them?" Wren asked. "No can do, lady," he answered. "No way to safely anchor the boat there." Mars squinted. "When I rescued you," he continued, "I simply passed by and grabbed you. It was pretty risky. With the wind now, it's impossible, I'm afraid." "There's a cave there," Mars said, looking at the rocks. "There's nothing there," Trench said. "It's just an empty cave. There are some rocks there where we could maybe anchor if you want to take a look." Mars stared at the cave, wondering where he had seen that before. As they approached, Wren lifted her body slightly and put her hand above her eyebrows, focusing her sight. She pointed at the cave. "Can you guys see that?" 2 battleships stood on the small portion of the sand beside the cave. Even from a distance, they could see the numerous cannons and naval guns pointed at the sea. They were both covered by blue metal armor. The Trench remained unaffected. He grabbed a spyglass and pointed at the cave. "We shouldn't get closer," Mars said. He then looked at Wren and said quietly, "I'm pretty sure the path back home is there." Trench remained static, focused on the cave. They approached. A few soldiers stood inside the ships, their weapons on their shoulders. 2 of them patrolled the beach. Wren and Mars exchanged looks. Trench kept sailing toward the cave. Mars rushed toward the fisherman. "What the hell are you doing?" He grabbed him by the shirt and shook him violently. "Turn the boat around." The battleship grew before their eyes and drew them in like a magnet. The soldier waved, signaling with his fingers for them to return. Trench didn't react. The soldier rushed to one of the naval guns. Mars threw Wren to the ground and lay on top of her as a hail of bullets surrounded their boat. The loud noise woke Trench up from his trance. He quickly turned the wheels, making a retreat. Mars and Wren lay on the ground with their faces pressed against the floor. The shots stopped. Trench exhaled deeply, sat down, and lowered his head. Aegon was inside the cave. The sea was quieter. The clouds gave place to a shining sun. The way back to the beach was filled with silence, relief, and bewilderment. Trench sailed smoothly as if nothing had happened. His eyes were fixed, looking ahead as if nothing was being seen. When they arrived at the shore, Mars and Wren jumped out and lay on the sand. The fisherman dragged the boat out of the water. Mars was panting. What the hell happened there? Wren didn't answer. She looked at him as if waiting for Mars to answer his own question. Trench sat beside them. First of all, I need to apologize for what just happened there, he said calmly. I got blind when I saw Aegon there. I just froze. He stopped for a moment and looked up. You see, he proceeded, when Bogus took the power and appointed Aegon as his number 2, things were pretty tense, as you know. Me and my brother, we used to work together. He lived near my place, and we met every day in the morning and sailed away fishing and drinking. See, my brother was always the idealist one. I never cared for politics, but he did. He was always well informed about what was happening, while I just wanted to go to the sea, get my fish, and go home and drink my beer. He was connected. He knew things. Whatever was wrong with the world, he would point it out. Needless to say, he wasn't happy with how things went, and he was frustrated because he actually supported Bogus in the election, as many who were like him. Me, I didn't care. Didn't go to vote. I'd rather have a beer on the porch. Anyways, he was very frustrated. Me, I was just living my life, but he couldn't just sit down and relax. He was working less and missing days. He had no friends. He was always at home. Before, he used to hang out with some weirdos. You know, those greasy, ugly people who always have something to complain about. Well, for the first time, something big was really there, but they didn't care. They didn't want to accept that they were wrong. Ain't nothing worse than a coward. Anyway, my brother was pretty much all alone all the time, and I didn't feel like meddling. Perhaps this is my fault, too. The fisherman stopped talking. Mars and Wren exchanged looks as if trying to decide whether they should say something or not. As Wren started to open her mouth, Trench sighed. After a while, he made some friends, some guys from a group known as the Liberation Army. The few times I saw him, he was always talking about taking down the government. He asked me to join him in the meetings he was having and all that crap. I didn't want to. My life was fine. It didn't change that much compared to before. Maybe I just didn't want to see it. You see, us small fishermen, we were left mostly alone. As long as you don't mess with them, they won't mess with you. But my brother couldn't just stay quiet. He was different from me. He was always empathetic. He was planning something. He kept thinking about how great life would be outside these walls. How could we know that? The only time we leave our property is to go to the sea. But he was an idealist, and that's what got him killed. They said he drowned. I got a letter. I didn't believe it back then, and I still don't. He hadn't gone fishing for a long time. He was a great swimmer. Ain't no current strong enough to drag him down. I believe he tried to escape. They killed him and threw him into the sea. That's what happened. Ain't no one convincing me otherwise. You see, that's why I was like that when I saw Aegon. I just wanted to go there and beat him to death. He is the reason my brother is gone. He may not have done it himself, but he did it. He and Bogus. If I could, I would kill them both with my bare hands. You better believe it. The fisherman silenced for a minute. He looked up, put one hand under his chin, and squinted. You know what? He continued. You should come home with me, and I'll show you why I know that. I'll show it to you. If I get told on, I don't even care anymore. Let them come. I'll take my vengeance, at least against one. Come with me and I can show it to you. Then you tell me what the hell is going on in that cave. I can see you know something. I ain't stupid. Mars looked at him for a moment and lingered to give him an answer. It's fine, he said after a moment. I can understand it. More than that, I respect it. I would want to do the same. He looked at the sea in silence for some moments and then looked at Wren. What do you think? It would be fine to go there, right? Yes, of course, Wren answered. So when are we going? The fisherman stood up quickly and grinned. You guys have time now? All right, chapter 10 next week. My next story is from David Pahor. It's called Warden's Smokes. Certain women have an outlandish way of departing from an abusive marriage. About her mother having left, she received a call from the nursing home on Sunday at 8:05 a.m. Of course, it also woke Frank, who started screaming again about demanding order in the household. As he ponderously staggered out of bed, his Henley shirt of faded khaki riding high on his beer belly, she ran downstairs with a bathrobe. She hid in the garage to better hear the excited voice of the deputy administrator. Saturday, 1. Since retiring from the force, Frank has established a strict schedule and cultivated a heightened intolerance to its deviations. He is pissed he had to drive across 3 counties on an NFL division playoff Saturday. She anxiously watched the throbbing veins in his ruddy forehead as he listens to the fatigued nurse explain. They were going to increase the anti-dementia meds, but that wasn't a solution to the fundamental problem that Ma had severed all tethering to reality. Anemoia, the nurse says, is just one of the symptoms. It's referred to, as well as anticipatory nostalgia. She recalls imaginary memories of fanciful places and events. Her patrician youth in the cloud cities, haunting armored reptiles with her uncles, starting to be an exoplanet curator and venturing on missions throughout the galaxy in golden vessels. Saturday, 2. As she bends over her ashen-faced mother to kiss her goodbye, she is surprised to feel her firm grip. The deterioration of faculties must have regressed. This time Ma had been utterly unafraid of Frank and even somewhat condescending towards him. "Don't worry. When I return home, I'll tell them also to retrieve you," she whispers to her daughter. Sunday, 2. Amid Frank's loud upstairs cursing, she retires her mobile phone to a shelf, retrieves the hidden lighter and forbidden pack, and lights one up, inhaling lustily. She really doesn't give a F anymore what he approves of or threatens with. Ma had disappeared from her room and the facility sometime around midnight. But the staff was initially more concerned with the power blackout and the illuminations in the inky skies. Now her daughter, too, has a way out. The zookeepers take care of their own. My third story is entitled Bad Friends. Even Bad Friends Can Have Your Back by Keith M. Leonard. And this was published in Horror Hounds. So this, as I mentioned before, this is a kind of like a young adult ghost story. This is a work of fiction. It contains scenes and descriptions that may be disturbing or frightening to some readers. The author does not intend to promote or condone any violence, cruelty, or harm depicted in the story. The story is meant for entertainment purposes. This is what she's written here right at the top. Jesse always seemed to get to the old church first, and Jordan is always running late. There's a regular time, and then there's Jordan's time, his mother always says. Jordan rides his bike up the gravel drive. Jesse is sitting on the rotting front steps of the abandoned church. "Hi, Jordan." "Sorry, Jess. I was a little late leaving school. I had a meeting with the principal." Smiling, Jesse says, "I am used to you being late. What did the principal want to see you about?" "There is a guy who was always picking on me at school." Jesse snaps her head to look at Jordan. "What guy?" "Everyone calls him Butch," Jordan says. "I don't even know his real name. Brent or Bryce? Shit, I don't know." Jesse stares at Jordan without blinking. "Today he would not let me out of the washroom stall for 15 minutes. When I finally got to class, Mrs. Merkel pulled me aside and asked why I was late." "Unlike you to be late," Jesse says, smirking. "Very funny, Jess." "Sorry, not sorry." Anyway, after I told her, she let me go to my seat. She then left the classroom for a couple of minutes. When she came back, she told me to see Principal Harris after school. "And what did the principal say?" "She says she will meet with Butch. She told me he is having some problems at home. I guess he bounces between living with his alcoholic father, his aunt, and various friends. Couch surfing, you know." Is the only response from Jesse. "She says it's not an excuse, but it might explain why he's acting the way he is." "That doesn't give him the right to bully you." "I know. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that anymore. How was your day? What did you do today?" "I just hung around waiting for you," she laughs. "I wish my mom would let me do homeschooling. You have it made." They both hang out for the next 2 hours until Jordan looks at his Timex. "Shit, Jess, I have to go. We're going camping this weekend. Mom says I have to be home before Dad gets home from work." He jumps up and sits on his bike. "I used to go camping. I used to do it a lot before," she says, almost like she wants to say something more. "You could come with us sometime. I'll ask my parents if you like." Jessie turns her head toward the boarded church doors. Maybe, she says. See you here on Monday, Jess? I'll be here. As Jordan pedals away, Jessie calls out to him, Don't worry about Butch. He will get his soon enough. Jordan smiles and waves his hand. On Monday, Jordan rides his bike from school, hoping to be at the church first. In the 4 weeks he's been coming to see his friend, he is yet to be the first to arrive, and today is no different. Damn, Jess, are you always here? She smiles. How was your day today? No trouble from Butch, I hope. No trouble at all. He wasn't at school today. Jessie nods. I told you not to worry about him. I don't think he will bother you anymore. Let's hope so. Want to throw marbles with me? Jordan pulls a cloth bag from his backpack. There is a clattering noise as he sets the bag on the step. Yes, I would like that. The next day, Jordan is 30 minutes later than normal. Jessie is in her usual spot when he comes zooming up the drive. He jumps off his bike without stopping. It crashes into the front wall of the church. Jess, you won't believe this, he puffs. Sweat is running down his red face. Are you all right, Jordan? Yep, but guess who isn't? Jessie shrugs. Butch, he's gone. Jessie couldn't hide her grin. Gone? He's dead, Jess. She doesn't respond. She looks at Jordan, who is still panting. Can you believe it? They found him down by the creek. The other kids at the school are saying he was hanging from a tree naked. Naked, Jessie asks, and raised her hand to hide her smile. And what else are they saying? He had the word bully carved in his chest and on his back. The words, no more. His panting is heavier than when he first jumped off his bike. Isn't that crazy? That is something, all right. There was an assembly in the gym after school. Some counselors made speeches and gave us business cards to give to our parents in case we have feelings about Butch that we want to discuss. Jordan finally stops pacing and sits next to Jessie. She puts her arm around him. I told you not to worry about him, Jessie says, and squeezes him close. They spent the next 2 hours sitting on the steps talking. Jordan finally gets up and goes to his bike. I hope you didn't damage the tires when it crashed, Jessie snickers. Nah, I have crashed it worse than that. Same time tomorrow? You know I'll be here waiting. Okay, see you tomorrow, Jess. Jessie puts her hand on his shoulder and turns him toward her. You are my best friend, Jordan. You know I will do anything for you, don't you? Her eyes darken as she looks into Jordan's eyes. Anything. Jordan smiles and gazes into her eyes. I know you will, Jess. He leans in and kisses her for the first time. Never having kissed before, he stands in a trance until Jessie pulls away. I'll be here waiting for you tomorrow, Jordan. Yep, see you tomorrow. He jumps on his bike and pedals away. His lips are still tingling, and he has a warmth in his stomach he has never felt before. Jessie watched Jordan ride away. When he makes the turn onto Main Street, she turns and passes through the closed doors into the church. So at this point, I'm going to take my break, and I've got a 2-minute commercial for you here, as I mentioned in the beginning, to give you more details about this Wreaths Across America radio show broadcast, and also to tell you about my website. So stay tuned, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. I want to invite everyone to listen to Crown of Pahor Stories and Poetry every Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Wreaths Across America Radio. Search out www.wreathsacrossamerica.org/radio by typing in the word Wreaths in these mobile apps, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, or TuneIn. Or find them on a web browser and join us to listen to the show and support WAA Radio, Whiskey Alpha Alpha Radio for any veterans listening. Wreaths Across America is a nonprofit radio station that supports veterans programs and organizations that help needy veterans. By joining us at Wreaths Across America, you are helping to support veterans in need across the U.S. So search us out and enjoy the shows they have to offer and thank a veteran while you're at it. Now I want to take another minute or so to ask for a donation of any amount to help me keep this podcast going and to advertise my website. I've set up a donation tab on the Crown of Pahor Stories and Poetry webpage at rss.com and a donation page on my website at www.crownofpahor.com using PayPal for your security. This way there is no credit card info saved anywhere and you can use any currency you wish from around the world. If you like this podcast, please share it with everyone you know in your social circles, as the writers I showcase in this podcast deserve all the exposure they can get. I created this podcast for them because I love to read their work, and I believe it should be shared with the world. Now I want to explain how to find my website. This show is audio only. Just take the website name from the podcast logo shown here and search for it. Visitors finding the website for the first time will reach the welcome page to learn a little bit about what's inside. There you'll see a homepage link at the bottom of the page. Click on it if you wish to enter my world. And on the menu bar at the top, there are links at all the pages in the website. Feel free to look around all you want. If you should happen to want to buy one of my books, all the better. Thank you for your patronage and support. Now back to the show. All right, I'm back. And now for my fourth story. This one's called The Girl and the Golden Thimble, Steal from the Fae at Your Peril by Patrick Metzger and published in Imogene's Notebook. This story was told to me by my great-grandmother, who heard it from her great-grandmother, to whom it happened as a young girl. And I swear it is true as any story ever told in the world. It was long ago, before the Great Famine and the leaving for so many for Canada, America, and Australia. Life was hard then for those like my many great-grandmother's family in their little village where they grew a few potatoes and kept a pig by the hearth, earning barely enough to pay the landlord and feed the 3 young ones. In those days, children worked for their keep in the fields and in the house, cooking and cleaning. The girl had been sent to fetch water from the well, which lay some distance from the village. Returning, she thought she saw a red fox dash into the long grass, and as she was one with adventure in her heart, she put her buckets down and ran after him. Shortly she lost the fox, but found herself near the fairy fort, a mound the size of 10 houses on which no grass or trees would grow. Everyone in the village knew better than to go near it, for the good folk demand privacy. But as the girl turned back to her buckets, something gleaming high on the mound caught her eye. She knew she should ignore it, but the day was bright and her spirits were high, and it seemed foolish to fear an empty hill. She ventured towards the fairy fort, cautiously climbing towards the shining thing, and picked it up. It was a thimble, but not an ordinary one. All the village girls had thimbles for their sewing, but most were made of wood. Miss O'Fallon, the woman who kept the house for the parish priest, had a thimble of hammered brass, but this thimble was cast of solid gold and inlaid with beautiful patterns and decoration. She looked around quickly. There was no one to be seen. Surely, she thought, this must be a lost thing from years ago and belonged to the finder. She slipped it into her apron and ran back to her buckets as fast as her legs would carry her. Now she knew that if her father and mother saw the thimble, they would want to know how she came by it, and if she told them she had found it at the fairy fort, then the switch would come out for certain. So when she got back to the thatched cottage that the 5 of them shared, she hid it straight away under the straw beside the bed where she slept with her brother and sister. But there was no stealing from the fairy folk. That night she woke to a tiny woman, no bigger than my grandmother's hand, and as beautiful as a summer sunrise, standing by her bed. "You have my cup, child," the woman said softly. "Your cup?" said my many great-grandmother. She looked to her sleeping mother and father, hoping they might be roused by her voice, but they didn't stir. "They are glamour, child. They will not wake." The tiny woman reached under the straw and pulled out the thimble, which was indeed the perfect size for her drinking cup. My grandmother was a brave girl. "You're the fairy folk," she said. "Aye, so you say. We call ourselves the Tuatha-De-Danann." She smiled and was impossibly even more beautiful than before. "Would you come with me to see my home?" I say again, my great-great-great-grandmother was a brave girl, and she wrapped a blanket around herself as a cloak and followed the woman back to the mound in the woods. When they arrived, she saw there was no longer a barren hill, but a vast castle with towering walls and parapets and flags fluttering in the night breeze. From within came light and music and laughter. She felt a gentle tug on her hand. "Come in, girl, come see." The fairy woman was tall as a human now. "I have to go home. My family will wonder." "Go home," the fairy laughed. "You must stay. You'll be a princess here. You will have the finest of food, fountains of fresh milk, golden gowns to wear, silk sheets to sleep on, fairy maidens to wait on you hand and foot. Come," her grip tightened. My grandmother thought of the castle and of the wonderful things inside, and of her own small cottage, dusty and hot in the summer, and cold and wet in the winter, and of the nights she fell asleep hungry. And she thought of her mother's rough hands, so soft in comfort, and her father's face, lined and burned by sun and wind, but always smiling and laughing. She thought of her small brother and sister running and playing with her in the meadow near their house. "No," she cried, reaching into the sleeve of her nightdress and pulling out the crust of bread she had stealthily snatched from the table at home, for it was known in those days that bread is a charm against the good folk. The fairy gasped and loosed her grip. My great-great-great-grandmother pulled away and raced back to her cottage, not looking back once. She never saw the beautiful fairy woman again, but for many years afterward, she would sometimes find her sewing thimble in a place where she hadn't left it. And that is the story of my grandmother and the fairy castle, and is the true one. And the village is still there, and the fairy fort is still there. But I will not tell you where, because we must treat the good folk with respect and not disturb them in their business, and I would not be responsible to them or you if you should seek them out. Now I've got a science fiction thriller for you here. This is called The Forbidden Basement. He Loves Me, and I Have Nothing to Fear, by Mark Soroviak, M.E.D., published in the Fiction Writer's Den. With a trembling hand, she opened the door to his basement, a door that had been locked for Marigold since before she met her fiancé, Kelvin. She moved cautiously down the dusty staircase with her penlight threatening the void below. Down. What a wild 2 years it has been. Kelvin was everything she dreamed of in a partner from when she was a little girl in her playroom marrying off Barbie and Ken. He's kind, has a dependable job, and never had eyes for another woman. Kelvin's grace and kindness had somehow managed to win over her racist grandfather. The first time Pops met Kelvin, he declared with finality, "No kin of mine will ever marry a black man." Step. 6 months later, Pops changed his mind and consented to the wedding, and everyone in the family shared in the white lie that he supported the marriage from the beginning. Step. The long flowing tail of her elegant white dress caught on the railing, jolting her to the present. "Kelvin's your husband now, not your fiancé," Marigold silently chided herself. "He loves me, and I have nothing to fear." This has been her mantra since the first night she went to his house and saw the industrial padlock on the cellar door. Step. When he told her the basement was forbidden, she laughed. "Forbidden, Kelvin? You sound ridiculous." Then Kelvin would smile, the comforting smile she would one day fall in love with. "Yes, Marigold, forbidden, until our wedding day." She laughed twice as hard at the incredulity of Kelvin planning a wedding day on their second official date. Step. What did he mean by forbidden? Was he religious? Maybe he saw saving himself for his future bride. But on their fifth date, they made love without the guilt of breaking an oath made before God. That night, held in the afterglows and warm embrace, she asked again. He responded with a gentleness that had no equal. "Forbidden until our wedding day." Step. Halfway down the stairs, she remembered telling her sister Kelsey about the mysterious door. The two stayed up many nights, drinking margaritas and hatching ideas to discover what was inside. Marigold wanted simple plans to steal a key, while Kelsey would dream up elaborate confidence schemes involving her friends and paid actors. The most complex used her ex-boyfriend Brett, dressed in a police uniform, pretending to arrest Kelvin. Step. Marigold never tried any of the plans. Relationships are built on trust, and I trust Kelvin. He loves me, and I have nothing to fear. Step. Nearing the bottom of the steps, she wondered why the drab concrete of the room beyond soaked up her flashlight beams. Are the batteries dying? Or, in her anxiety, she couldn't complete the thought. Step. She turned to ask Kelvin about the flashlight, but he was not there. In the excitement of Kelvin unlocking the enigmatic gateway, she never questioned if he would be there to walk beside her. Into the unknown she walked, for it was never his unknown but hers, and his certainty propelled her forward. Step. She would lose her nerve if she turned back, or even looked for his silhouette at the top of the stairs, and Kelvin would lose his faith in her. Kelvin loves me, and I have nothing to fear. Step. With a final step remaining, she wondered why Kelsey was the only person she entrusted with the secret of the basement, this one odd quirk of Kelvin's otherwise endearing personality. Why had she chosen a flashlight and not her phone? Step. The unfinished concrete chilled her bare feet as they moved into the basement proper. Marigold had ditched her wedding shoes hours ago, preferring the comfort of her natural stride to any flat or slipper. Forward. Her eyes struggled to adjust to the dim light, reading her lady torch, as Kelvin called the miniature flashlight, but it failed to penetrate the cold mist engulfing the basement. Forward. Kevin loves me, and I have nothing to fear. Her words took on an edge at her disappointment. She did not know what to expect when she opened the basement door. However, she was sure the reason for the secrecy would be evident from the moment she left the staircase and saw the rest of the room. All those cautious movements, and she felt no closer to resolution. Forward. She walked with her left hand extended, groping about in the limited visibility. The left hand of darkness, she whispered, self-soothing with the words of writer and futurist Ursula Le Guin. Her left hand felt the obstacle in her path before her eyes could determine its shape. Exploration. Stepping closer, she put the penlight in her mouth and felt along the surface of the unknown shape. Her hands rode along the rigid material, sensing no imperfections. She guessed the object was made of glass or its analog. It was about as wide as a shower stall in an efficiency apartment and rose from the floor to the ceiling. Had Kelvin renovated the old house's basement as a wedding day surprise? Her knuckles scraped across a metal handle, roughly where she expected the shower door to open. The light snapped and a soft puff of air. The door opened, and spotlights in the ceiling automatically turned on. Confusion. Why would a shower stall have a panel of electric lights and flashing buttons? What was the purpose of the tiny LED readouts and scientific gibberish on the console? She stepped into the shower, if she could still call it that, and a mechanical chime rang. A flat green laser appeared from a pinhole in the ceiling and spread in a horizontal line. As the laser approached her head, she repeated the mantra that had steadied her so far. Kevin loves me, and I have nothing to fear. Her unfailing trust did not prevent the mild flinch when the laser touched her skin. She held still, guessing the green line to be a scanner of a design far beyond her understanding of technology. The green line ceased at her feet without incident when a second laser appeared in the sidewall, replicating the path from a different vantage point. She held her breath and remained perfectly still until the laser stopped. A bright green light appeared on the most prominent readout with the message, "Access granted." Illumination. Industrial ventilation in the walls rapidly drained the concealing mist from the room. Bright lights exploded from every direction, leaving temporary black spots in her vision. When Marigold's eyes adjusted, she saw a row of pods. Pods? In the simulated daylight, she could no longer mistake these strange glass enclosures for shower stalls, and pods fit better than any other word she thought of. Exaltation. She stepped out of her pod, barely noticing the empty device's placard with the number 013. She moved to explore the next pod in the row, blood pumping, courage flourishing at the return of her sight, fearless. Reaching pod 012, she noticed a difference in the setup. While the earlier pod was clear and empty, this pod had an occupant behind the frosted glass. She searched the console for an open button or a clear glass command and found none. In frustration, she rubbed the side of her fist in a semicircle to melt the cold and gain a temporary window. The frigid material bit at her skin. She had to make several attempts before succumbing to the icy pain. Multiplication. Looking into the glass, she saw a face she would never forget. The same face she saw in the mirror every morning brushing her teeth before work. The same face that fell in love with Kelvin 2 years ago. Overwhelmed with questions, she sprinted to the next pod. Inside 011 was another copy of her, and 0110, and 010, and 009, and 008. All the pods from 012 to 002 had her duplicates, her clones. With a deep breath, she checked pod 001, but it was empty. Marigold sank to her knees and wept. Revelation. She didn't know how long she sat on the cold clinical floor of the basement laboratory when a gentle hand touched her shoulder. Marigold came from her lover's soft and comforting voice. Marigold gazed into Kelvin's all-knowing, all-caring eyes. Kelvin, the first pod and the last pod are empty. Yes, he nodded stoically, understanding the question's significance before she asked it. Kelvin, she said, with a vulnerability she never expected to feel. Am I the original Marigold or the final copy? My last is a poem. It's entitled Whisperfall by David B. And he writes, in the heart of Whisperfall, I weave a tapestry of silence and simplicity, inviting you to pause and ponder the journey of a single raindrop. Through minimalist verse, I seek to capture the essence of a fleeting moment, illuminating the profound interconnectedness of life. Each stanza unfolds a meditation on existence, from the whisper of impact to the ripples of consequence, embodying a Zen-like reflection on the universe held within a drop. Join me in embracing the quiet, where the softest echo reveals the deepest truth. Thanks for reading. In the silence, a single raindrop narrates the void. Not a sound, but a whisper, a universe falls in its curve. Where it lands, a story ends, another begins. Ripple by ripple, life echoes. This moment, both empty and full, holds everything, yet nothing at all. Listen to the whisper fall, where silence speaks the loudest. So that's all I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed it, and you'll return again for another episode next week. Sláinte. Garamahagat. Thank you for listening to the show today. I hope you enjoyed the variety of stories and poems again this week. Maybe one of them might touch your heart a little. Disclosure for everyone. In order to read the complete stories and poems, you'll need to sign up for a subscription to Medium. If I see a link by the author on one of the stories to allow everyone to read it, I will let you know in the newsletters. Please return again next week for another episode of Crown Biha Stories and Poetry. As a Sean K, I want to continue to light you with a story or a poem that may bring you a smile or make you think a little bit after we part for the day. As I say goodbye this week, I wish to leave you with this Irish blessing as you go about your day. Long life and fair health to you. Salfada a Gusprech, Sláinte Chukwad. Slán go foil. Goodbye for now.